opportunity to talk about how we can better protect our environment and our Earth for present and future generations. Now, I am here on behalf of the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, but I'm also here on behalf of a new national initiative called Green Amendments for the Generations, and you'll learn in a moment what that is. Throughout the day, you're going to learn about many of the environmental protection laws that we have in place and how you can more effectively use these laws in your advocacy, in your litigation to protect our environment. Because the fact of the matter is, these hundreds of thousands of environmental protection laws we have in place here in New York and across the U.S., they are not well implemented and they are not well enforced, and as a result, they fail. They fail in their own goals of protecting the environment. But we also have to recognize that the way this system of laws is written, each and every one of these laws, they are written so as to accept pollution and degradation and the take of species as a foregone conclusion. They seek to prevent it to a certain level, to a certain goal, and once that goal is achieved, what this system of laws does is manage the how, the when, the where, the by whom that environmental degradation and pollution is allowed to take place. And so fundamentally, big picture across the board, their implementation is failing us. And of course, we have many, many gaps in our current system of environmental protection laws that also leave a lot of protection untouched across the state and across the nation. And again, it's because they are written to accept pollution as a foregone conclusion. And as a result, we have communities, we have families, we have species, right, that continue to suffer in very serious and significant ways because of pollution, because of degradation. And we also have minority communities that continue to be inequitably targeted for actions and operations and development projects that subject them to a much higher level of toxic contamination that impacts them throughout their entire lives. Now, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in the early 1970s, there was a legislator that actually realized that there were these many failings of our current system of environmental protection laws and realized that a better, higher path was needed to better protect our environment for present and future generations. And he realized that one of the reasons why the environment was allowed to become so degraded in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and frankly across the nation, is because we don't recognize and protect our environment and our right to a healthy environment in the same way we recognize and protect all those other fundamental freedoms we hold dear, like the right to free speech, like the right to freedom of religion, like our private property rights. And so in 1971, this legislator, Franklin Curry, proposed to change that when it came to the environment. He proposed that an amendment be added to the Bill of Rights section of the Pennsylvania Constitution that would recognize the inalienable right to pure water, clean air, and a healthy environment, and legally protect those rights in the same way we legally protect those other fundamental freedoms we hold dear, at the highest level under the law in the Bill of Rights provision of the state constitution. And when this proposed amendment went before both houses of the Pennsylvania legislature, it passed unanimously. And when it went before the people of Pennsylvania, it passed overwhelmingly by a vote of 4-1. And so actually in 1971, the people of Pennsylvania had a constitutionally recognized and protected inalienable right to a healthy environment. And so you would have thought from that moment on, environmental protection in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania would have been far better and far more successful than in every other state across the nation. But as you and I both know, that was not to be the story for Pennsylvania's environment and Pennsylvania's communities. And that's because very early on, there was an incredible overreach, an actual misuse, I would say, in how this newly minted constitutional provision was used. And long story short, I won't go into all the details, but long story short, very quickly we got decisions out of the Pennsylvania courts, including the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which, as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court described it in a dissent at the time, which emasculated, disemboweled this newly minted Environmental Rights Amendment, declared it to be good public policy, but to not have the same legal strength as all of the other provisions in the Bill of Rights section of the Pennsylvania State Constitution. And so for 42 years, we had this great language on the books about recognizing and honoring the inalienable right to a healthy environment. But in reality, nothing had changed in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania legally for environmental protection. And then, in the mid-2000s, enter drilling and fracking for gas, shale gas extraction, bringing with it its tremendous deforestation and devastation of our natural landscapes, bringing with it water pollution of all kinds of our rivers and our streams and our groundwater and drinking water supplies, bringing with it the release of air pollutants, including climate-changing emissions like methane. And under the current system of environmental protection laws in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, really being able to very successfully overwhelm Pennsylvania communities and environments with their industrial operations. But the drillers and the frackers felt that there were too many lands, too many natural resources that were protected from their industrial hand, and so they decided that they were going to change that. And very literally, leaders from the fracking industry got together, went behind closed doors, and wrote for themselves a piece of legislation. A piece of legislation that was passed in 2012 and signed by the legislature and signed into law by the governor. And when this law was enacted, it came to be known as Act 13. Now, because Act 13 was written by the industrial leaders themselves, it was a real gift basket to the industry. And it gave them all sorts of rights and opportunities. It mandated that drilling and fracking be allowed to happen in every part of every community in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, stripping from local municipalities their ability to use their zoning authority to protect residential elements of their community, to protect historic and environmental preservation areas or their agricultural districts. It gave to the fracking industry waivers from minimal environmental protection standards. It gave the fracking industry the power of eminent domain in order to be able to seize property, to be able to store their gas under the ground where it was geologically appropriate. It gave the fracking industry relief from their obligation to notify private drinking water well owners of actions and activities that may have resulted in contamination of their private drinking water wells. And it put in place a medical gag rule that protect the industry from having to disclose or having the disclosure of the dangerous chemicals that they were using that may in fact have been harming Pennsylvania residents, right? So it was a total giveaway. And as a result, while things were really, really bad already in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania when it came to drilling and fracking, the fact of the matter is, it was about to get a whole lot worse. A whole lot worse. Now, at the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, right, we have been successful up until this day to keep drilling and fracking operations out of the boundaries of the Delaware River Basin. So our river watershed was going to be protected from Act 13, but that wasn't good enough, right? We wanted to and do want to protect all rivers and all communities from this devastating industry. A harm to one is a harm to all. And so we realized very quickly that we had to find a way to challenge Act 13. But the fact of the matter is, how do you challenge a law that's been passed by the state legislature and signed by the governor? What can you do? You can ask them to repeal it. That wasn't going to happen in Pennsylvania. So you have to have a higher power, a higher authority. And we realized at the Delaware Riverkeeper Network that we had that higher power in that long-ignored Constitutional Environmental Rights Amendment. And so we joined forces with 7 towns and a physician to challenge Act 13. And each of us brought our own arguments to this joint battle. But the argument that the Delaware Riverkeeper Network brought to the table was that Act 13 was unconstitutional, at least the provisions we were challenging, because it violated the environmental rights of the people of Pennsylvania. Right? And that Pennsylvania Green Amendment, that long-ignored Green Amendment, was, of course, the cornerstone of our argument. This case went all the way up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And December 19th of 2013, we got an amazing victory out of a very conservative Supreme Court led by a very conservative Supreme Court Chief Justice. And actually, the plurality opinion was written by that conservative Chief Justice. And I want to read with you some of the findings that Chief Justice Castile wrote in the opinion that was released in December of 2013. He wrote, by any responsible account, the exploitation of the Marcellus Shale Formation, drilling and fracking, will produce a detrimental effect on the environment, on the people, their children, and future generations. That the natural resources that were being harmed were resources that were essential to life, to health, and to liberty. And that as a result, the provisions of Act 13 that we were challenging violated the environmental rights of the people of Pennsylvania. And in that moment, with this decision, with this victory, not only did we get declared unconstitutional some of the most devastating aspects of Act 13, but we very literally restored to the people of Pennsylvania their constitutional right to pure water, clean air, and a healthy environment. Breathed legal life back into that long-ignored Green Amendment. In the decision, Chief Justice Castile also wanted to recognize, and did recognize very firmly, that the right to a healthy environment was not given to the people of Pennsylvania by Article 1, Section 27 of the Constitution. This was a right that we already had by virtue of the fact that we are people here on this earth. But because of Pennsylvania's Green Amendment, this right was given the highest level of recognition and protection you can have under the law here in the United States of America. Bill of Rights, constitutional level protection. That because of this Green Amendment, every government official at every level of government was duty-bound to protect the environmental rights of all the people of Pennsylvania, every single one. And they had to protect those rights not just for present generations, but the future generations yet to come. Since we had this victory in December of 2013 in Pennsylvania, we at the Delaware Riverkeeper Network and others who have followed along with us, seeing the power of this victory, have been doing the work of defining and defending what it means to actually have a constitutional right to a healthy environment, right? Because it's not instantly obvious. I mean, if you think about the rights to free speech and freedom of religion, we've had them for hundreds of years. And yet we still argue and advocate over what they mean in one context or another. So we're just getting started with that work when it comes to environmental rights in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But what I also realized in the wake of that victory, as we were going forth doing our Pennsylvania work, I realized that there was a message in this victory for all communities in all states across the nation. The message that our rights to pure water, clean air, and a healthy environment are inalienable, inherent, indefeasible rights that belong to us by virtue of the fact that we are here on this earth. That these are rights worthy of constitutional recognition and protection. And that what we need to do in every state across the nation is to rise up together and demand and defend our right to a healthy environment. And I believe that the best way that we can do that is to rise up with what I call a Green Amendment movement. A Green Amendment movement that will seek and secure the passage of Green Amendments in every state across the nation. And ultimately down the road, in the federal Constitution. But that's step 2. And why do I say we need a movement? We need a movement because there are only 2 states with a Green Amendment. A Green Amendment of this kind. Pennsylvania and Montana. There are a whole boatload of other states that talk about the environment in their constitutions, but they don't rise to the level of being a Green Amendment. They don't recognize and protect the right to clean water, clean air, and a healthy environment as an inalienable right to be recognized and protected in the Bill of Rights section of the state constitution, and therefore given the same legal protections that we give to all those other fundamental freedoms, like the right to freedom of religion and freedom of speech that we hold dear, right? And of course, we don't have a Green Amendment in the US Constitution. So what does New York have? New York is one of those states that has language. It has a lot of language. It has good, important language that has been used to great success for protections of aspects of New York's environment, but it does not recognize and protect the inalienable right to a healthy environment in the Bill of Rights section of the state constitution. In the same place where it protects and recognizes the right to gamble, it does not recognize and protect the right to clean water, clean air, and a healthy environment. And so the question is whether or not the people of New York are in a moment in time when they're willing and wanting to seek and secure their own Green Amendment. And the Delaware Riverkeeper Network has been working with environmental advocates of New York, and of course our new Green Amendments for the Generations initiative, to try to advance this cause here in the state of New York. And we have been successful. We actually have a Green Amendment proposal right now moving through the New York State Legislature that needs your support. And there's a petition for organizations and individuals in the table in the back hallway that you can sign if you want to support this. Now, New York's Green Amendment is not the same as Pennsylvania's. I wished it were a little bit different, but it'll get us what we need. It would recognize that each person shall have a right to clean air and water and a healthful environment. And I want you to know that as part of our Green Amendments for the Generations initiative, we've also secured a proposal in New Jersey, one in Maryland, and one in West Virginia. So the movement is happening. Now, what does it mean to have a Green Amendment? People inevitably ask that question because they say you still have fracking in Pennsylvania. Well, let me tell you, it means a lot, but it's not an instant panacea. I mean, think about it. If you got a Green Amendment here in New York State today, all the harmful polluting industrial operations wouldn't suddenly disappear. You'd have work to do to take advantage of that Green Amendment to secure protections from those harmful operations that rose to the level of a constitutional violation. Because fracking came into Pennsylvania before its Green Amendment had legal life, we're having to do that work step by step when it comes to fracking, as well as other industries in Pennsylvania. But you get a lot when you get the passage of a Green Amendment, and you start to instantly have the opportunity to make important progress. Your right to clean water, clean air, and a healthy environment is legally protected on par with those other fundamental freedoms. Every government official is duty-bound to protect your constitutional right to a healthy environment. It is no longer good enough for legislators and regulators to say, we complied with the statutes and we complied with the regulations when approving that dangerous industrial operation in the heart of that residential community. They now have to show that they've complied with the constitutional standard as well. There's a changed focus in government decision-making. It's no longer about accepting and managing pollution, right? It's now legally focused on prevention of pollution, anti-degradation. Government officials are duty-bound to consider the science, the facts, and the impacts of their decisions, or they will not be able to demonstrate they've complied with their constitutional duty. They have a duty to protect the environment while seeking to achieve other goals. Environmental justice is given a new breath of life because now every single individual has the same constitutional right to a healthy environment, and government officials are duty-bound to treat everybody equitably. There can be no more sacrifice zones. Now when people go into public meetings with their government officials to advocate for the environment, they are no longer hoping and praying these government officials will do the right thing. They now walk in expecting them to do the right thing. So they stand a little straighter and a little taller. They use different language. They approach the conversation differently. It's powerful and it's important. Think about how the people who advocate for free speech rights, freedom of religion rights, or gun rights, how they go forth and how more forceful they are with their advocacy. Well, now that same sense of empowerment comes to environmental advocates. And environmental advocates themselves are no longer just tree huggers and fish lovers, people haters and job killers, environmental terrorists or eco-jihadists. We are now recognized as the true U.S. patriots we are, because we are no longer just fighting for a hope, wish, and dream when it comes to the environment. We are fighting for a constitutional right. So we are true patriots. The goal with the Green Amendment is better decisions on the front end. But when our government officials fail us, we now have immediate access to the courts to enforce our constitutional right to a healthy environment. So I hope you've been inspired to join me in this Green Amendment movement to help spread the word. If you're a teacher, we have a teacher guide and a student guide you can get for free to bring this into the classroom. And of course, we have the book, The Green Amendment. We have our National Green Amendment Movement. If you want to be part of a drawing for a free copy of the book, just fill out this form. We'll do the drawing at lunchtime. And otherwise, please sign the petition in support of the passage of a New York Green Amendment. Thanks all for coming.